So I'm recording now, but you and I, Drew, welcome back to the show, and we'll have you brief the listeners as to your last. I mean, it's been I think almost 6 months since we talked last, but you know you can
Yeah.
brief that. But I will say in the introduction that the previous episode that you were on, but you and I were just talking about your final weigh-in, and
hmm
before we explain the whole story, I guess, talk about that, you know, the end of this long road, and then that'll kind of segue into the specific things I have to ask about it. But then we'll
Yeah.
get into some of the emotional and psychological things you've been going through
Yeah.
for the last 6 months. So I guess just talk about your final weigh-in because that was all
The final
too.
weigh-in. Yeah, it was tough. It was tough, Charlie. Thanks for having me back on. It's a pleasure to be here and always talk with you, a fellow wrestler. You kind of understand, as we were talking before, what I was going through to make weight. And yeah, it did bring back some memories of like my wrestling days back in the day of like having to cut weight and make weight. So I knew I had the mental discipline to do it, but to be honest with you, it sucked because I'm in a different place. Like I have two kids, I'm a single dad, and I had to make them food. So the hard part was like cutting weight while making my daughters like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches or oatmeal or cereal sometimes, like the food that I would just love to have a couple bites of, like when you're cutting weight, food tastes so amazing when you're hungry. So it was definitely a struggle that past week. But here's the thing, I went into it 100% honest with you. I went into it saying to myself, if I make weight, cool. But if I don't care. Like, I'm not going to start taking, jumping into the sauna. I'm not going to start, taking diuretics or like taking laxatives. Like, I'm not going to go to these extreme measures just to hit the number on the scale. I was like, okay, I'm going to do my special diet, which was a high protein, low calorie diet. So it was like chicken breast and turkey breast with mustard a couple times a day. So like maybe 800 to 1,000 calories, very small amount, of course, not sustainable. But I was like, okay, that's all I'm going to do. I'm still going to do my workout, which is once a day, and nothing more than that. Like I wouldn't go for an extra run or an extra workout on top of that. And I said, if I jump on the scale, the number is what's supposed to be, then cool. But if not, I'm not going to beat myself up over it because I'm already pretty miserable. And who cares about the number? I'm not making weight for a fight. Like
Mm.
I don't have to make weight. But I definitely tried. I wanted to try and see if I could do it. And boom, I stepped on the scale, ended up being less than where I was when I started. But it definitely took its toll on me. I was pretty miserable that week. My girls didn't like me that week. So it affects your mood. It affects your happiness. It does affect your sleep in more ways than you think. And like I said, it's not great for your metabolism. It's not great for your hormones. I don't recommend it. But if you're trying to like make weight for something, there's some strategies there. And UFC fighters know how to do this like easy now, almost to like a science where they know exactly what to do 24 hours before, and then they have a full 24 hours versus like back in the day when you and I wrestled. Dude, you have an hour after weigh-ins to to be on the mat. Like that's not a lot of time to get in tons of food, and sometimes you can make yourself sick. So, anyways, to make a long story short, I did make weight for my final weigh-in.
It was pretty. It This whole thing that we're going to dive into, I would say emotional is probably the biggest takeaway I took from watching you in this whole thing. And I think that's kind of I mean, it is your mission. And you talked about it before to bring, that into fitness, right? To kind of
Yeah.
tend to people's emotions and touch on the psychological factors that determine how we are physically, what we
Mhm.
consume, et cetera, our overall health. But it was just watching that video, I thought, man, I felt a personal connection to it. And I want to segue that into a question that doesn't necessarily have to do with what you did and what we're going to talk about, but what you mentioned, your daughters. It's unique. Okay, you have a unique profession. You have a unique livelihood, and your daughters are front and center to it. And you mentioned, you got to cook for them, and then you're doing this. And I'm sure early on you've explained to them, and your ex-wife is in the public as well. So, you know, they've been exposed to this public life for a while. But it's
Yeah.
still, I'm sitting there thinking, man, his daughter's in the background. One of them might even be recording. You can hear them like giggle and talk and stuff. What do they make of all of this?
That's a really good question. And, I talked to them before the weigh in, and I talked to them throughout the journey because we knew what was going to happen. We were going to go from me, who's normally a healthy guy, to all of a sudden having tons of junk food in the house. So we had to talk to them just so they understood what was happening, why I was doing this. They don't really understand what the word empathy means. I tried to explain it to them, whether it's stuck or not, I don't know. But we tried to come up with some rules to say, hey, daddy's going to be doing this for the next 4 months. This is probably what's going to happen to him, from a physical, body composition perspective, like he's going to change. But also, they were also aware of how it affected me mentally and emotionally. And before the weigh-in, I asked them, like, hey, what did you guys think of this journey? And they're both like, I hate it. I didn't like you. I don't want you to do it ever again, because they saw how it affected my well-being, my mental health. They saw how moody I was and grumpy I was because I wasn't sleeping well, and my hormones were out of whack. And it just wasn't the same best version of myself, where I was patient with them and more joyful. And they got to see how food affected that, and that lifestyle affected that. On the flip side, they got to see what happened when I did eat healthy and I did consume, healthy foods and exercise and live a healthy lifestyle. Not only did they see me shrink or lose the weight, but because that's not the most important thing, but they also saw how it affected me so much in so many other ways, where my mood was improved. I had more patience. I could, be energetic and do fun things with them. And they could see the difference in that. So I think it was a valuable lesson for them. But at the end of the day, they didn't like me doing this. They didn't really want me to do it. But here we are at the end of the day, and they hopefully took something from it, other than, oh yeah, daddy got a big belly and then he lost it. I think they know that there's more to it than that. But that's a good question for them. Maybe I'll see if they can get more specific with their answers. But yeah, I think they did learn something from it, and my hope is that they take something away from this whole experiment.
And
So
yeah, and my guess would be in the future when they look back on it and they watch your video, because it's all online and everything, that they'll be able to realize how much they did take from it. Empathy was the word I was searching. Emotions, obviously,
yes.
emotions have to do with empathy, but empathy is the word that I couldn't remember when a few minutes ago. But to bring empathy back
Yeah.
into the fitness industry is like your main point in doing this, and it's.
Mhm.
Honest to goodness, I've told you directly, and I've said it, and I've done how many times I pointed out to my brother, like what you did back then with the first Fit to Fat to Fit, and then now, is for me one of the most compelling things I've ever seen ever. Like I can't, because I know
Thank you.
how into training I am and into all of it, but aesthetics being part of it for me. And I think to myself, oh my gosh, I can't fathom. I mean, I can't fathom, because once a week, generally, I do indulge like that. But for 4 or 6 months, it's like, holy smokes, I can't. So it was mind blowing to me to watch you do it. Talk about your emotions.
Yeah.
Start wherever you want. But I mean, it was like, I like that you're an emotional guy. You're built like a Greek god, first of all. And you're also as emotional as I am, probably. But just talk about your flux of emotions through this.
Yeah, and you probably saw my emotions come out in my final weigh-in. I definitely was very emotional. I do get emotional at the end of like these type of journeys. I remember I did my 100 miler about a year ago, and crossing the finish line is just all the emotions just come to me, and I'm definitely more of a sensitive guy when it comes to those emotions, because I am in touch with those emotions. But my emotions throughout the whole journey, that was kind of I kind of went into this journey thinking, a little bit cocky, thinking it's going to be easy because I've done it before. Like, oh, I did this in 2011. I know how to do it. And then boom, I was humbled once again, because it was way more emotional once again than I figured it would be. And the biggest thing that threw me off, that was kind of like the most emotional part, was my breakup. And I hope you don't mind me talking about this, but
No,
going
definitely
through a
go for it.
really hard breakup with my girlfriend at the time in the public eye, where I was in the middle of my journey. Neither was expected to happen. It happened. It was kind of like all of a sudden type thing. It's heartbreaking. She was sad and depressed, and I was sad and depressed because of of the breakup. And then it switched. Like, that's where a lot of the valuable lessons came from, was because of the emotional turmoil that happened. Because before that, I was eating the food because it tasted good and to gain the weight, right? Let's be honest. Like, the food definitely freaking tastes good, but I was also doing it to gain the weight because that's what my job was. But then when that happened, then it switched, and then the food became kind of like my numbing mechanism, or to deal with the emotional pain. And this is where emotional eating is more powerful than people think, because what happens as humans, when we have to deal with emotional pain, it's so uncomfortable. It's super uncomfortable to go through a breakup or a divorce or financial trouble, bankruptcy, whatever it is, whatever the emotional pain that's causing you. And so what we do as humans, we have so much access to substances that can numb that pain, temporarily numb that pain, whether it's food, drugs, alcohol, social media, porn, sex, TV shows, like movies, whatever it is. We have access to these substances that can distract us for a little bit, take away temporarily that pain that we're feeling. And the problem with food is it's so accessible, it's so affordable, it tastes amazing, it tastes better than drugs probably. It tastes like it's so, and it's right there at the grocery store. It's like at your fingertips any time of the day you want it. You can Uber Eats food to your door. And so it's probably the most powerful drug that exists, because that's how we deal with emotional pain, is we numb ourselves with substances rather than face that emotional pain. And so that's where it flipped the switch for me, where now I was eating the food because, dude, Ben and Jerry's ice cream, there's something to say about Ben and Jerry's ice cream, some alcohol, to take away the depression that I was feeling. Even though I knew in the long run this was bad for my health, I knew that it was almost worth it in the moment to be like, screw it, give me this. I need something to temporarily numb this pain that I'm feeling. And it did that. And I'm sorry, but salmon and broccoli, it just don't do the trick. Like it just doesn't do the same thing chemically to your brain, where you get these little dopamine hits constantly, with every single meal. You have like Cinnamon Toast Crunch for breakfast. You have like pizza and burritos and mac and cheese and, ice cream and all these foods that make you feel good temporarily. We have access to that, and it's so hard to break that vicious cycle. And so for me, that's why this journey became so emotional, because of I dealt with it firsthand this time, where I had an emotional crisis in my life, and food was there for me. And I'm not condoning that behavior. I'm just saying I understand it at a deeper level, and I see why people get stuck, because they do that for years. They program their brain to do that for years and decades, and then it's like, okay, now I'm going to try and willpower my way out of this. Well, good luck. You're just like a drug addict who's been giving themselves drugs for years and decades, and now they're going to be like, okay, just try and willpower your way out of it. I'm sorry that's going to work for maybe less than 1% of the population. And that's why food is such a powerful drug, and that's why transformation is way more mental and emotional than we think. And I'm trying to be a voice for those who struggle by saying, hey, this is coming from someone who's normally fit. This was way harder than I thought it was going to be, and I didn't grow up overweight. I didn't struggle with weight issues as a kid like millions of Americans out there have struggled with. So imagine doing what I've done, but for years and decades, and then trying to break that. It's a lot harder than we think. And that's all I'm trying to say, is bring awareness for more empathy and a better understanding on the mental emotional side.
Yeah, man. It's almost like you were going through the motions, meaning feeding yourself with this unhealthy food to go through your process, but then it hit you, and you were actually doing it because it was satisfying an emotion that you had. So it added a reality to it. And have you and your ex, go in detail or not in detail, like, have you thought,
Sure.
did this cause that? Like, did this experience cause the friction that led to your breakup?
Okay, that's a good question. Yeah, I've had a lot of people asking me that. And here's because people only see what they see on social media. They don't see, we had problems before this journey happened. This journey probably amplified our problems that we had. Like when you're in a physical state, an unhealthy state, it affects your mental and emotional state more than you think. And so going into this journey with problems that we didn't talk about publicly, we just kind of kept private, and we go to therapy. This journey amplified those problems to the point where, had I not done it, would we have broken up? Who knows? But probably, unless those problems were eventually fixed. So I don't it's hard when people say, oh, well, you shouldn't have done this because you lost your relationship. It's like, well, you just don't know the whole story, because we've had issues before this. And yeah, I was more reactive. My ability to handle stress wasn't what it used to be. So when you're in an unhealthy physical state of mind, and this is what my hope was people could see their relationships in me, in a sense where they're like, oh, okay, maybe I'm not the best husband or best wife when I'm physically unhealthy. Not just being overweight. That's a whole nother conversation. But just being physically unhealthy, where you're not sleeping through the night, you're running on empty all day long, you're eating junk food, you're not exercising, you're amped up on stimulants like caffeine all day long, and then you drink alcohol at night to help you fall asleep, and you just go through that cycle, and you just aren't aware of how much that lifestyle affects you in your relationships. And so even me being aware of it, I was aware of all of that was happening, but still I think, looking back on it, it's just this unhealthy physical journey that I was on amplified the issues that we already had that already existed.
Yeah. And talk about your self-esteem. Like I mentioned earlier I feel like you and I are similar in obviously we're different people, et cetera, but I think we have similarities. And I think training and fitness, it plays a major role in both of our lives. And the farther away I get from performance, right? So I'm having a fight or doing a contest or something and winning and getting validation for that. It now becomes much more like process-oriented validation, process-oriented self-esteem and self-value that I give myself. So when you let go of all of those habits and all of those things that make you feel good about you, even though this is part of a project, this is part of a bigger deal, what does that do to your self-esteem?
That's a good question. This journey was interesting compared to my first one as far as self-esteem goes, because the first journey in 2011, I freaked out, man. I've never been overweight, and I definitely had my moments where I lost that self-esteem and confidence, and I wanted to go up to strangers and explain to them why I was overweight and have them go to my website because it was so uncomfortable. Fast forward to this time around, I've done a lot of inner work on myself, and I've gone to therapy and done a lot of life coaching and self-reflection and discovering who I really am. And I've learned from that first experiment that I'm more than my body, that there's more to me than my body. And one of the tests that I put myself through this time that I didn't do last time was I took my shirt off out in public at a pool or a beach. I actually went to Hawaii for Thanksgiving, so I was pretty heavy, and I was totally comfortable taking my shirt off. Why? Because here's the thing, man, like men aren't judged as harshly in society. Like the dad bod thing isn't that big of a deal to people. It's maybe a big deal to someone who's a former fitness person that is overweight for the first time. But me having been there, I just realized, look, no one really cares. No one's staring at me and be like, oh my gosh, look at that guy. If anything, I probably fit in, more, being part Hawaiian and having a bigger belly, like just, Polynesian or bigger people sometimes. And so for me, I felt like no one really cared. And I took my shirt off. And yeah, there were small moments where I'd catch myself being like, oh, dude, I normally have a six pack, but I don't right now. So anyways, I don't think I really struggled with self-esteem a whole lot this journey. I was definitely more confident taking my shirt off and just saying, hey, this is my body, like right now, temporarily. But I know that I'm going to get my body back. And I know that, this isn't the final destination for me. So that was kind of my self-talk to get me through those moments of maybe feeling a little bit self-conscious or having a low self-esteem. But it was very brief, short-lived. And I would catch myself and being able to detach myself from those emotions and realize that, hey, this is temporary, and I'll get back to fit. I'm sure I will.
And then your interactions with other people, treatment of you from other people, did that alter? Did you notice that changing at all, or no?
I would say no. Similar to what I was saying, how men are judged less harshly. Like if I was a woman being overweight, I think women are judged more harshly by other women or by society for being overweight. And no one really treated me differently. That's the thing. It's like dad bods, that's kind of in right now, and it's not that big of a deal to society. So no one really treated me any differently that I could tell, to be honest with you. So yeah, I think I was fortunate in that.
I think probably, and you just said something that I don't feel, right? So like I said, we're similar in some areas, but obviously different in some too. You mentioned that you knew, despite how you felt, you knew, I'll get it back. This is part of the process. I'll get it back. And for me, I think maybe one of the reasons I'm drawn to you and drawn to this, what you do, is that it brings out my insecurities I have with myself. And so and I want to, there's a couple parts to this question, but the starting point here, I worry in my mind with discipline in general, with anything, with training, with nutrition, with reading books, with producing shows, my life in general. I worry about kind of like, Vision Quest, the movie Vision Quest. Like I worry like losing my edge. I fear losing my edge, and that drives me. And it is the fear that drives me. And so if I were in your spot on a daily basis, I worry about losing my edge. So if I were in your spot, man, and it was compounded for months and months and months, I would start to doubt, can I get it back? can I
Yeah.
get it back, and start listening to that voice. You didn't feel that at all?
Not this journey. The first journey I did. The first journey, I definitely worked through those kinks where I'm like, okay, am I going to be stuck like this? Like, what if I get too comfortable and I can't get out of this? Or what if I just like lose the weight, then binge eat my way back to where I was because it tasted so good and it felt so good to be, to eat that way. But all those fears, you kind of, we all have this homeostasis. Like your body, your homeostasis is probably where you are, like maybe within 5 to 10 pounds. Going to the extreme where you're like letting yourself go completely probably isn't going to happen to most people where you're like going to get stuck like that, unless some severe traumatic thing happens where you just, can't really control that happening. But for the most part, people like you and me that know how to discipline ourselves, I think we can always tap into that. And I think for me, this time around, I wasn't worried about that because I knew that, hey, like it's kind of like the beginning of a wrestling season. You go, no one's in shape on day one. You're like puking, you're like out of shape, like, you know what I'm saying? But you're not like morbidly obese, but you're just not in wrestling shape. You know that give yourself a couple months of doing that every day, you're going to be on this other level. And so I think that's kind of my mentality, is knowing that, hey, for 4 months, it can be looked at as a long time, but it can be looked at as a really short time too, where, man, 4 months just went by and I'm 60 pounds heavier. Am I really going to be stuck this way? Probably not, because my body doesn't like being this big. And that's the thing, is like my homeostasis is more where I'm at right now, and just trusting that your body, your mind will be able to, eventually go back there. I think the hard part is not just eating that way, but not exercising. That's, I think, what scares most people from doing what I do, is the no exercise part, because to not move your body, that's like therapy. That's your stress reliever. And not being able to do that, I think, is the hardest thing for athletes. They could eat the food for sure. That's the fun part, but not being able to move your body, that's the thing I think most people always struggle with.
Yeah, I hear that. I hear what you're saying really well.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of the homeostasis, and you're right. Like binging for a weekend is good, but then on Monday you're like, oh my gosh, screw that.
Yeah.
The not moving part, I operate with this kind of sense of, reward, work, reward. So I whether it's right, wrong, good, bad, whatever, I operate I operate with that. I want to like take a little bit of a step back to
Sure.
emphasize why what you're doing is really important, because what you just said, taking that 4-month lapse of who you are, who Drew Manning is, taking that 4 months to go through this process, to put on weight, to live an unhealthy lifestyle, and experience all of the negative aspects that go along with that. You said, because I knew I was going to bounce right back.
Yeah.
All right. Flip it, right? Flip it. Be that person who's grown up unhealthily, who's only been in unhealthy, who's only eaten junk their entire life, to get 3-4 months in and feel momentum, but then have the same confidence you felt, the draw, the negativity they're feeling inside, and how powerful that is for them.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's a really good question. And this is why empathy plays such a huge important role in this whole journey. And this is why I tell people all the time, like, what I did is not the same as someone who has been overweight their whole life, because all these fears come back up because their homeostasis is where they're at. And so their body's scared to go to this new place, and they lose part of their identity. Like if you grew up your entire life out of shape, overweight, okay, part of your identity is your body image. And the same thing goes for me, or people who grew up their entire life in shape. Part of their identity is their body. And this is why so many people will lose the weight and then gain it back, because their identity is still built in the overweight version of themselves. And this is why transformation is way more mental and emotional than just, hey, do this lifestyle, eat less food, and work out every single day, and hopefully you fall in love with it. That just doesn't happen to 90% of the population. They do it for a little bit, but their brain, their mind, their identity is saying, this isn't you. This isn't, like, you're not going to be able to stay here. Like, you're not a model. You're not this, like, and then they have that negative self-talk, and those fears come up, and they realize that maybe they're not good enough, or they're not worthy enough to live this way and to look this way. And that, this negative self-talk just tells them, reminds them, like, hey, you belong over here. This is where you are. And until you break that mindset, you're always going to be stuck where you are, not just physically, not just your weight, financially, in business, in life. we all stay in this like safe circle until we learn how to break outside of those self-limiting beliefs. And this is why this journey applies, the lessons that you can take from this apply in other areas of our life outside of weight loss, right? It's the same kind of concept where you have to break free from those self-limiting beliefs and realize that you are more than your body. Your identity shouldn't just be based on what society tells you it is, based on what your body looks like. There's more to you than that. There's more to you than just your bank statements. There's more to you than your salary. There's so much more potential, and we just don't believe that because we've always been taught, no, your role is right here in this safe little bubble. You stay here, and no one can hurt you, you know. But until you do that, you're always going to be stuck, going back to that. Even if you just step out of it for a second, you might be scared. This is why a huge mindset shift has to happen, where you realize that your identity is not based on just what your body looks like. And that's kind of what I'm trying to help people break free from. And this is why when I have people follow my program, sure, they're going to get advice on meal plans and workouts and diet, nutrition, like all of that is part of physical transformation. But the biggest thing I coach people on is mindset, shifting their perception and realizing that they are more capable than they think when it comes to any transformation. And it takes baby steps, like, have them do meditation. I'll have them do a gratitude list daily. I'll have them do positive affirmations. I'll have them take a cold shower. I'll have them make their bed. I'll have them do these things that have nothing to do with weight loss. All these things do is to train their brain to become comfortable in uncomfortable situations. And if you can train your brain to become comfortable in uncomfortable situations, that can transfer to any area of your life that you want to improve or transform. Is realizing like, hey, physical transformation, like eating healthy food and exercising, is uncomfortable. It sucks. It's hard. But if you can say to yourself, hey, I'm actually okay. Like, I'm not dying. Yeah, this is hard, but I got this. Same thing with like taking a cold shower. That sucks. 60 seconds of cold water on your body is freaking hard for a lot of people because we've been taking warm showers our whole life. And now we're like, oh, I can't last 60 seconds. But if you can learn how to slow your breathing down, right, in that moment of like wanting to freak out, that's where you start to control those thoughts. You can control your brain to become comfortable in that uncomfortable situation. And then that transfers over into other areas of your life. And then you break free from that little safe bubble you're in. And you realize, hey, this isn't so bad. This isn't so hard. Like, I can do these amazing things. What else can I do? Right. And then you try these things that you were afraid of for so long. And yeah, maybe you won't get the perfect body. Maybe you won't become a billionaire, but you're becoming in the process of doing and falling in love with the process, whether or not the results come or not. You're a different version of yourself because you're doing the process and you realize, hey, I'm doing this process because it's fulfilling to me. Whether or not the results come or not doesn't matter, doesn't determine my happiness. It's, I'm able to be fulfilled now, even though my life's imperfect, even though maybe I have more body fat than I want, or I don't have as much money as I want, I can be fulfilled now instead of saying, one day when I get this body, one day when I have this much money, one day when my life is perfect, and then I'll be happy. And then boom, you're dead. And then you never were happy. You never were truly fulfilled because you were taught that one day when you achieve this amazing result, then that's when the happiness comes. So it's shifting that perception.
Yeah, and there's two things I want to touch on. The first is it's two separate books, a similar idea, but the one book is Irresistible, and then the other book is Atomic Habits, and they both talk about, the one is more so geared toward addictive behaviors, a lot to do with technology. The other one just about habits, Atomic Habits, small but meaningful habits. Yeah. And in the one book, it's referred to as behavioral architecture, and then in the other one, it's environment design. And that could play into your journey in a variety of ways. The behavioral architecture, either being putting the Cinnamon Toast Crunch in your house or not putting the Cinnamon Toast Crunch in your house. Like that behavioral architecture, like what you do is going to affect your actions. If it's there, you're going to take it. If it's not there, there's more resistance and better chance you're not going to consume it. But what you're talking about here in terms of the things you do, it's the way I think of it. And I'm confident that you at least understand what I'm saying, if not feel that way too. Yeah, I have a vision of who I am and who I want to be, who I strive to be, my ideal. And I try to just piecemeal my days to be that person, to have those things constructively contribute to being that person. So eating junk food on a regular basis doesn't help that process, right? But exercising, reading books, being with my family, doing podcasts, et cetera, that helps put you toward that ideal that you have for yourself. And
Yeah.
the problem with that is it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of
Yeah.
consistency, and it's very slow and it's very hard. But it's like, if you want to do it, that's the way you do it. The things you mentioned, the cold shower, the gratitude, etc. People will be like, seriously, what else can I do? It's
Yeah.
like, no, that's what you
What
can
pill
do.
do I take? What's the supplement that gives me the six pack instantly?
Yeah, but
All right.
it is really that, certainly not easy, but it really is that kind of step by step of a process.
It has to do with a shift in perception. This is the problem: is we've been fed an idea, or a painting has been painted for us as far as what success looks like, and then we grow up for decades thinking, oh, success is getting that. Like, once I have those results, then I will be, fulfilled or happy, or make it in life. And the problem is that that's our perception. And unless you learn how to shift your perception of, maybe success isn't in the results, success is in falling in love with the process and doing it because you realize you're worth it. Like, eating healthy food and exercising, people think is a punishment. People think, oh, I have to suffer through this to get this body, in hopes that once I have that body, people like me, I'll be loved by society. But maybe I should do them. Maybe if I can learn to shift my perception of those things and realize that exercise, actually, I feel good. It feels good to feel strong. It feels good not to have any injuries. It feels good to move your body in a way that makes you feel like, man, I can accomplish some things. And then same thing with eating real food. Like, maybe it doesn't taste as good as Ben and Jerry's ice cream, but you realize your digestion is better, your sleep is better, your sex is better, your mental clarity is better. Like, you have all this energy because you're eating real food. And you're like, okay, maybe it sucks in the moment, but in the long run, I do know that this is better for me. So maybe I realize my self-worth and say to myself, hey, I'm worth it to feel good. I'm worth it to feel healthy and strong. So I'm going to do these things because the process of doing that makes me feel better. And so that's where it becomes a lifestyle change, because now you're doing these things not as a chore, not in hopes to get like this huge reward out of it, but because you realize, hey, I'm worth it to feel good. And guess what? These things make me feel good. Maybe not in the moment. Like, sure, Ben and Jerry's ice cream makes me feel good in the moment. Drugs make me feel good in the moment. But in the long run, is this making my life better? Is this making me feel better? Probably not. So you got to invest in yourself and realize that these short-term, rewards sometimes can trick us into thinking, oh, this is what happiness is. When in reality, it's the long-term stuff that we do by investing in ourselves with exercise and eating healthy. As far as this realm of like fitness goes, we realize those things are actually the things that can feel good in the long run, even though in the short term, my muscles are burning and I'm sweating and like I'm exhausted, but it feels good in the long run to achieve those things. And you start doing the process because it makes you feel good and you're worth it to feel good. And then that's where huge transformations can happen.
And the perception thing, if someone's thinking, well, how do I change the perception? For me, the process of changing my perception, it's not my own, just mine. I mean, this is how it's done. Is it's first like an awareness or a target, and then manufacturing the steps around that awareness. Hey, I'd like to live a healthier lifestyle. Okay, that's my target. That's my awareness. That's the perception that I want to have about myself. I'm the person who lives a healthy lifestyle. All right, so how do I manufacture it? How do I do it? Well, I've got to start doing these steps, and then that's how your perception changes, because in that process, kind of an add-on to this is, I was thinking as you were talking, I've had to personally recalibrate my beliefs, my wants, my desire. Like, so when I fought and when I wrestled, I did not think about nutritional value at all. Like zero, nothing. It was straight make weight and perform. It was like junk, like oftentimes junk shit I was eating, like just garbage of food. And so I would get in this mindset of make weight, wrestle, splurge, make weight, wrestle, splurge, make weight, wrestle, splurge. Same thing with fighting, but fighting was, there were months between fights, so it was a little less. But then when I started living post competition, it became live a healthy week, splurge on the weekends, live a healthy week, splurge on the weekends. And I would just gorge myself. And I'm like, well, I'm eating more crap than if I would just eat a crappy lifestyle. Like, this is not working. So then I had to think to myself, why am I doing this on weekends? Like all weekends, 48 straight hours. Wow. I don't know that I even want this. And so now it's less, right? It's probably cut in half. I still do it because I enjoy it. But I had to recalibrate, like, what? No, I want to actually be healthy and fit, and I'm 40, and I want to live a long, healthy life. And that's why this stuff is important to me.
Yeah, I agree. And another list of things that can help shift perception is doing things outside of what your norm, like being open to new things. Like for example, for me, the things that shifted my perception were going to therapy, which growing up that was not in my toolkit of things that those people with problems, they go do therapy, right? And I don't have problems, but therapy, life coaching, reading books. I didn't grow up reading books, but then I started reading books or listening to books on Audible, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's this idea resonates with me so much, and this is my life right here, and oh, that helps me see this situation from a new lens. And then podcasts, podcasts are huge in helping shift my perception. Like, oh, Tony Robbins is talking about this meditation. I've never been open to meditation. Maybe I'll try that out. And then I'm trying these new things. I'm like, man, this is really helping me through this and helping shift my perception. So these types of things that maybe you're like, okay, gratitude list, what is that going to do for me? Do it for 30 days, 60 days consistently and see how it impacts your life. Same thing with meditation, same thing with like exercising. If you don't exercise, like walking, do it for a period of time and be like, and I promise you, your perception starts to shift. And that's why you can't just be stuck in your own ways thinking, oh, how am I going to get out of this? No one's going to help me. No one's going to help, like understand my situations. Like, have you been doing that? Have you been going to therapy? Have you been meditating? Have you been, life coach, reading books, podcasts? Like, are you doing these things that can really change and alter your perception for the better? Or are you just kind of sitting with your own thoughts, watching reality TV, thinking, why can't I get free from this? You know what I'm saying? So it's rewiring your brain, which takes time, but I promise you, you're worth that investment to rewire your brain and shift your perception so that not necessarily your situation changes, but your perception of that situation can change. And then that's the key to freedom right there. That's where you're truly free. It's not saying, okay, I need millions of dollars and I need my situation to change. I need to be rich and famous, and then I'll be happy. Or your perception of your situation, maybe you're making $50,000 a year and you're all of a sudden grateful for the things you have. You're like, man, I really am blessed, and nothing changed except for your perception of the situation.
So last night I was,
You know?
my wife and I were laying in bed and we were talking, and I was fretting about something that in the life scheme is very insignificant. And my brother, for the last almost 2 years, has been going through brain cancer, and he's had 2 brain surgeries already, and then in a week and a half he's going down to Texas again to see what's what. And I said to her, like in the middle, and this is the value, you mentioned podcasts and you mentioned reading books. Podcasts and reading books, you can, your motivation for that can be different. It could be to learn about building a business, learn about starting a podcast, learn about self-growth, whatever it is. But also there's so much value in listening to and reading about other people's stories. Because when I was like fretting about something that in my life is really insignificant, and then it dawned on me that my brother's going through brain cancer, I literally said, shut up, Charlie, go to bed, right? You're laying here sweating because you can't go to sleep because you're worrying about this stupid thing. There are bigger things, right? And all of that is perspective shaping and can definitely affect your actions moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. My heart goes out to your brother. I hope he's okay.
I appreciate it.
He'll be okay.
I appreciate it, man. Do you know of Ethan Suplee, the actor?
I don't know the name.
So he was the really big guy in American History X. He's been in a couple other movies.
Oh, yeah. I know who you're talking about. Yeah, Ethan. Yeah, I know who Ethan is.
You would know his face if you saw him. Anyway, he's like gone through a transformation over the last, I want to say he said it's been like a 20-year transformation. But he was recently on Joe Rogan's podcast. Anyone who is into this conversation, I would definitely recommend listening to that conversation, because he talks about the psychological, the depth of his challenges with living a healthy lifestyle and what eventually got him to the point that he is now. And it was a shift in perspective. It was identifying why, right? Why he was doing it. And then the change of actions that is a result of that, just really getting into that deep psychological stuff. But it would be a really solid complement to this podcast if you're taking a lot of value from what Drew is talking about.
Yeah. No, I've heard a story. I haven't listened to the one on Joe Rogan, but going from where he was, on Remember the Titans, and that kind of transformation, it has to require a shift in perception, man. It can't just be like, hey, I'm just going to willpower my way through this and become fit. And I think maybe there are some people that have done that just have that discipline. But I think there's got to be a huge mental shift, a mindset shift that has to happen at some point for someone to not just lose the weight, but then keep it off and have this become their new lifestyle. There's another guy, Obese to Beast, on Instagram. I've seen his transformation. Bruce Pitcher from Extreme Weight Loss. There's a small few people like that where they have transformed and then kept the weight off because some huge shift in perception happened, some mindset shift. It wasn't some new diet that they did. It wasn't some new workout or supplement that got them jacked or ripped or shredded that kept the weight off. It's the psychological aspect. And this is what the fitness industry, in my opinion, is missing, is that human element to weight loss. Like there's such an emotional tie to food that we underestimate the power of that. And we can't figure out, why can't people just eat less food? Like, why is that so hard, right? And unless you can empathize or been in their shoes, you don't really understand how hard it is mentally and emotionally for people just to be like, okay, I'm going to stop eating this food. We have to learn how to build self-awareness. The key to overcoming any addiction is self-awareness. And that's why, for me, what works for me is meditation or journaling or therapy really helps me become the observer of my thoughts instead of attaching myself to my thoughts and reacting to my thoughts. And so many times we go through life because we've been programmed to react to our thoughts. Oh, stress happens, give me the alcohol, give me the drink, give me some food, because I can't deal with the stress. My kids are driving me crazy. There's memes or movies about like, oh, just like eat chocolate and drink wine, or you just went through a breakup, eat some ice cream, that'll make you feel better. And that's just kind of, oh, that's what we do. That's the norm. And then we're like, oh, well, that's what you're supposed to do. And we go through life just reacting instead of being aware of like, okay, what am I doing? Like, why am I doing this? Like you mentioned with your, binge eating on the weekends, like, do I really want to be doing this? Or am I just kind of like out of control? My brain's kind of telling me what to do and I'm not really in control. You're not really aware. And building that self-awareness is key to overcoming any kind of addiction like this. And so that's what I'm trying to bring more awareness to in the fitness industry, is that side of it. That's what 80% of the population, in my opinion, struggles with. Not how to do keto or the vegan diet or doing CrossFit, whatever it is. That's not what people struggle with. It's the psychological aspect. They don't know how to get outside of their own head and see things through a different perspective, because they're so stuck in the same loopholes, going through the same programming, and they're like, I don't know how to break free from this. And rewiring your brain is something that's really interesting with studies now, and talks in like the I would say the psychedelic community, or like
rewiring your brain 100%.
Rewiring your brain. There's all these different methods now that are available to us, I think, that are really exciting, which could possibly help a lot of people. But just the basic stuff, therapy, journaling, gratitude lists, life coaching books, podcasts, those things, let's start there and see how that goes for most people. But if you're not willing to do those things first and foremost, I don't know if there's anything that can really save you. If you're not willing to do something, you have to realize that you're worth it to fight for this, not to look a certain way. It's not about looks. It's not about getting ripped and shredded. It's about shifting your mindset. And that's kind of what my hope is, that people will take away from this episode, or, watching my Fit to Fight to Fit story, is realizing that side of it. And then once it clicks for them, then the physical stuff becomes so much easier. Right. So that's kind of what my hope is. But
yeah. And a little side note here, the book How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan is a book about that, about using psychedelics to change your mind.
Oh, that's a great book.
To rewire your brain, essentially. I had something I wanted to ask that just slipped my mind, but from there, I'll skip over to the community, because this is part of your livelihood and part of your business, I believe. And you have an app, and you have people that went through it with you, and talk about that aspect and talk about interacting with those people.
Yeah, that was what was really powerful about the journey, doing this with other people, because this is something you don't really see in the fitness industry, where you see the trainer, the coach, the leader looking like you, and you get to do the journey with them as they go back to fit. And that's what I thought made it really intriguing and unique for people to be like, okay, there's our trainer. He looks like me. We're going to do the same meal plans, the same workouts, the same, program that he's doing for himself. We get to do that with him as he goes through that journey. And that's why, around 10,000 people signed up to do this journey with me, became part of my program, followed the meal plans and the workouts. Yes. Amazing transformations. But I think I was just talking to one of the couples that had a huge transformation. He lost 60 pounds, she lost 30 pounds. And they said the biggest impact wasn't so much the diet and the exercise. They knew they've been through weight loss journeys before. The thing that stuck with them was the meditation, the positive affirmations, and the gratitude list. They did that as a couple. And that's where they started to shift their perception of this journey that they were on. Instead of like, oh, this is a weight loss journey that sucks, that we have to suffer through, they were able to shift their perception of it. And now their perception of transformation or weight loss is totally different than what it used to be in the past when they would go through weight loss transformations. And I think that's what made it different, was trying to lead with empathy first. I think that's the most important thing, because no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And that's kind of what I try to do with my brand, with my Fit to Fat to Fit journey, is lead with empathy first and foremost, so people feel safe following me. But then also giving them those tools on the mental and emotional side, just as much as we do on the physical side, like with calories and macros and all that stuff we know is important. But giving them tools to help them through their mental and emotional challenges is, I think, probably the most valuable, most important part of this program. So
It's interesting, mental and emotion you mentioned a couple times, but most of my livelihood is from speaking to students, and a huge portion of speaking to students deals with social and emotional skills. Obviously, mental wellness as well. And it's interesting. I say quite often that I talk to kids about this, but really it's a lesson for grown-ups as well. All the kids' books I read, I'm like, oh, this is a picture book that took me 5 minutes to read. Oh, this is perfectly adaptable to my life as a husband as I walk upstairs and interact with my wife and my kids. So this stuff that Drew's talking about, obviously it affects your crew, right? The Fit to Fat to Fit followers, but as well as kids. So it's relevant across the board. 10,000 people, man, that's freaking awesome. It's awesome because it's really hard to convince people to take action. Like I talk a lot in front of a microphone and I share, et cetera, and you do too. But to get that many people to actually take action and to feel fulfillment from making that type of impact. I'm reading a book right now that he's talking about control and impact being like two huge parts of meaning in people's lives, both their jobs, their careers, and their lives. Talk about that. Earlier, I was kind of confused, right? Not confused, but earlier we were talking about your self-esteem, and you mentioned how your self-esteem didn't really waver this time around. And then I'm confused because I think, all right, well, if my self-esteem is through my actions, through my habits, through the process, and then my process goes to crap, like where's that value coming from? So I guess how did that work for you? And then secondly, talk about the making that impact on other people and the feelings you get from that.
I think the first part of my journey was knowing that this first part of the journey, even though my process was going to crap, it was helping me build a relationship of trust with my audience. It was making me more relatable. So when people saw the foods that I was eating, they saw me gaining the weight, they saw like how many calories were in my breakfast. They're like, dude, that's me. That is me in that. Like I see myself in Drew, his videos, what he's doing. And so I knew that part, even though it wasn't my normal impact, it was building this thing that I couldn't do if I just had the six pack and doing my normal routine. So this is why my brand is different in the fitness industry, where here I am doing the opposite of what most trainers are doing. But I know that is building a relationship of trust where it makes me more relatable to my audience, so that when I do lose the weight, they're more willing to listen to what I have to say because they trust me now because I've been in their shoes, if you will. And so that was kind of the mind trick that I had going into it. Was like, okay, 4 months of not having this action that I normally take. I'm taking a different course of action, but knowing that course of action is what builds the brand. Does that make sense? And so I knew that I had to take 4 months off of my normal routine, but this is why, my brand, I guess, stands out in the fitness industry is because of what I was doing in those 4 months of gaining the weight. Does that make sense?
Yeah, man. And it's mind blowing. I'm telling you, like I said, it's mind blowing, but then talk about the impact. Like, I feel like meaning is huge. Impact on other people's lives is huge. Yeah. Just talk about that in the change and the transformation that you saw in others.
Well, I think that's why you me, people like us do what we do because, yeah, maybe we're not on national TV, or we don't have our own TV show, or we're not like see numbers like Joe Rogan podcast, but you, I'm sure, get people reaching out to you like, dude, you made an impact in my life. You helped me through this. And because of you, like I was able to achieve this, right? We have those moments, those small moments where people reach out to us, and that impact is what makes you and me do what we do on a daily basis. Even though we might not get those messages every single day, we know that what we're doing has an impact. Someone out there is listening, someone out there's adjusting or changing or upgrading or evolving because of maybe something we said. And that's kind of what wakes us up in the morning. Like, okay, if no one was listening, if no one was watching this, I wouldn't be doing this, right? Like, if no one was even paying attention, or if no one even benefited from this, maybe we wouldn't do what we do. But because we know that this is impacting people's lives, it makes it worth it to us to fight every day to be like, okay, what can I do to serve people? Because not only are they getting something from that, but I'm getting something from that too as well. And so that's kind of what helps us, fight the fight and
Yeah.
do what we do, because it's worth it to us.
Every once in a while, and your audience, is bigger than my audience. You've been doing this for a long time, been on TV, have a couple different things going. But I swear, it's like every once in a while when I'm feeling down and out, it's almost like I'll get a godsend of a message that it's like,
Yeah.
oh, how did you know that you were supposed to send this right now? I had a guy reach out on Facebook 2 or 3 weeks ago that was like, oh my, I literally, I can't express my gratitude to this guy enough in a response on this
Yeah.
post. But you're right, feeling that makes your drive all that much more whenever you feel like you can't go anymore.
Yeah.
Before I forget, the thing I forgot about earlier, we were talking about perception and changing your perspective. And to listeners, if you can visualize, I forget what the other side is, but it's that witch face that has like, do you see a witch face, or do you see a pretty
Oh,
princess or something like that? That's essentially what we're talking about. You're looking at the same picture. Your life is your life, right? You're looking at that picture that some people see a witch face, and then you like look at it again, and then you see a pretty woman. Like, it's the same drawing. It's the same
yeah.
thing. It's your life. It's your job. It's your life situation. But with that self-awareness that Drew's talking about, backed by those actions that are very simple but repeatable actions, you start to make a dent, and you start to transition from seeing that witch face to seeing that pretty face or the other side of it. So that was an analogy that I wanted to put out there. And then the cheat meal, holy smokes, man. What percentage of that did you actually consume? Because it was it was amazing looking, amazing
I
looking.
know it didn't look so good. So that's the
Oh my
thing. It's like,
God.
when you go from one extreme to the other extreme, your eyes are way bigger than your stomach. So I actually didn't eat that much. I think I had one of those, like 1.5 cookies, 2 pieces of pizza, and probably, I don't know, maybe like 3 rolls of sushi, which is
Yeah.
seems like a lot, but like for you and I, that's it looked like way more. That wasn't just for me. That was for like a group of like 10 people that were
Yeah, it
there.
was wonderful looking.
So, but it looked cool, and it was for the gram. But but that's the thing, is like 20 minutes into it, I was full. I
Mm.
was like satisfied. I was like, see, all that buildup for like, oh man, this is gonna be so amazing, last 20 minutes, and then you're like, okay, well, I can't eat anymore. So that was short lived. So that's what I'm trying to let people know, is like, I know that the buildup to it is like, oh, this is gonna be so good, and like there are 20 minutes of that, like that bliss, that ecstasy, and then it's gone.
Yeah.
And
And
then
then
you're
did
full.
did
Yeah.
you Fit to Fat to Fit is Drew's social media handle if you're not following him.
Mhm.
I was gonna say this, and I thought, wait, maybe I'm only thinking of Elf, from the movie Elf. But I
Yeah.
feel like you did eat Pop Tarts throughout your journey. Like, would you
Yeah,
post
of
eating?
course,
Yeah,
dude. They're
that
so good.
I love that scene in Elf where he breaks that Pop Tart over the spaghetti. It's nasty, but anyway, when I would see you eat those Pop Tarts, Cinnamon Toast Crunch is like my thing.
Yeah.
And I do like brown sugar cinnamon Pop Tarts, but they're not like one of my top favorites. But
Sure.
seeing you consume them alongside the cinnamon toast crunch, and I think Eggos,
Yeah.
gosh,
Eagles,
it's
peanut butter and syrup.
yeah, man. I If I don't put a cap on it, I would go off the rails because
I
it's
had
like,
pe- I had people tell me they had to unfollow me because they were so tempted. They're like, dude, I want to eat the things he's eating because it looks so good. And I was like, ah, my bad. I
Yeah.
didn't mean to do that, but I get it, dude.
Yeah, that was the opposite. But it didn't affect me. I didn't unfollow you and it
That's
didn't
good.
ultimately affect me. We'll start to wrap up here. The naysayers, right?
Yeah.
Because obviously anyone will put a negative. It's like, oh my gosh, like throw upable half the stuff you see. Like someone posts a picture of a beautiful flower and someone yells at them because I don't know something's wrong with the flower.
Yeah.
But the negativity or the naysayers or the hate that you, well, I don't know if you got or not, but was it more or less than the last time, non-existent? How did that play out for you?
I think it was less based on the last times, because the last time I did it was most of my outlets were through traditional media. Back in 2011, the landscape was more the TV shows, Dr. Oz, like Good Morning America. I don't think those outlets are as powerful as they used to be. I think most people consume their content on social media. So we actually switched strategies and we did a couple like TV shows, nothing big, to be honest with you, but we focused most of our time and attention on growing social media. So we spent money on ads and we got way more exposure than we did, through social media engagement than we did through the TV shows. But I do think the TV show audience were the ones who were quick to judge and quick to be negative. But still, I would say that was probably less than 5% of my total interaction. Because what happens is when people understand why I do what I do and why I was doing it, instead of like, oh, this guy's just getting fat to rub it in our face, and he's just doing it because he thinks it, and yeah, and his body's totally different. Like the naysayers are the people who don't really understand why I'm doing it. They see a photo of me and they're like, oh, great, what does this guy think he knows? Like, but then people that consume my content, watch my videos, they follow me on social media, they realize, oh, his message is one of empathy. He's trying to bring more empathy to the fitness industry. People that understand it, they're not the ones to argue about it. The biggest thing that I see people say is like, well, it's different for your body because you were always in shape and you have muscle memory. And I'm like, 100%. I agree with you 100%. There's nothing to argue there at all. Like, yes, my body is totally different than someone who's been overweight for years. There's no way I could replicate that. Even if I gained 200 pounds and kept it on for 10 years, it's not the same as some kid who grew up and was bullied as an overweight kid. It will never be the same. So I don't disagree with those people. I think people are surprised when I'm like, I
You
agree
don't
with you.
fight. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, I agree with you. I don't have anything to argue there. But that's besides the point. That's not why I'm doing this, to show people like, hey, I lost weight. You can lose it too. That's not what I'm trying to say at all. So,
Yeah. Well, this has been awesome. Like I said, back when we talked at the end of November, or the end of October, and just watching, I'm so like just captivated by
thanks,
it,
Charlie.
and I appreciate you giving me your time and sharing your story with us. What's next moving forward for you?
So right now, my big focus is I'm moving my family to Hawaii, the Big Island, and I'll be moving out there in June. So that's kind of like the next big phase, because fit to fat to fit, I got back to fit. I won't step on the scale again for a long time. I am doing another program called Back for More, which I created, which is okay. Now that I focus on weight loss for 4 months, I'm trying to get people to take a break from constant weight loss and constant dieting and do a strength building program where we're focused on building some lean muscle mass, increasing our metabolic rate, and increasing our calories for a season. Because man, this country is like obsessed with dieting, weight loss, and people are on a caloric deficit all year round, dieting all year round, always trying to constantly lose weight, which puts a lot of stress on your body. And I'm trying to say, hey, take 2 months out of the year, maybe once or twice a year, to be in a caloric surplus. Be okay with gaining a little bit of weight, but you're focused on building strength, and I promise you that'll pay dividends in the long run. If you could, treat your body, I guess, more kindly by building some lean muscle mass, I promise you that will benefit your body in the long run more than you just constantly dieting and trying to lose more weight. Build some lean muscle mass, increase your metabolic rate, get stronger, and then you'll burn more calories throughout the day. And when then weight loss and fat loss becomes so much easier if you focus on these different phases instead of just constantly dieting and in a caloric restriction. So
Yeah, and one last quick question here that I thought, it was called Fit to Fat to 40. And
yes,
one of the things that really gets me is people who just feel like, who use the excuse, I'm getting older, so I'll just kind of give up and I'm going to gain weight and I'm going to not be, it drives me bananas. And so it's refreshing to hear you say that at 40, you were able to get back to size like like pretty well,
Yeah.
and it's possible.
Yeah. It
And
was harder in certain ways being 40, I'll be honest with you, but it is possible. Even though it might be harder for some people, it's still possible.
and do you notice any differences in you, in your body, in your physique, being a little bit older now?
My ability to recover is not what it used to be. My recovery, I had to be on top of that, like twice a day, sometimes 3 times a day, stretching, foam rolling. My back would get tight, my hips would get tight. So my ability to recover isn't as good as it used to be. I'll be 100% honest with you. My physique is probably pretty much the same. I have a little bit of like looser skin, not, I wouldn't say loose skin by any means, just I notice a difference in the elasticity of my skin and my lower belly and my love handles area, but it's nothing I worry about. Some people might notice it in the pictures when I post my pictures here very soon, my professional photos of
Mm.
before, during, and after, fit to fat to fit, like those photos. You might see it a tiny bit, but I mean, I really don't care. So some people might care and point that out, but it's not that huge of a deal to me.
Yeah, and again, I just want to drive home the fact that obviously the point of this is empathy in the fitness industry, but also there is a group of another thing where people just feel like I'm getting older, I just kind of give up, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you absolutely can do this.
Yeah.
So where can people follow you and get more of what you're putting out?
Yeah. So it's fat2fit.com is my website. That's my book as well. It's my podcast, and that's all my social media handles. So it's super simple, just fit to fat to fit. And you can kind of follow along on there and see what I'm up to and see what see what I have to offer, I guess you can say. So thanks again, Charlie, for having me on. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and I appreciate your support, man, throughout the years. So
Yeah, dude,
hopefully our paths cross in person soon.
I love it, man. I
Like
appreciate being here,
a
Joe.
spark or something.
Yeah, right. All right, buddy. Thank you.
Okay.